can't see a thing. Help me.
November 14th, 2018, and Captain Marcus Webb is flying 247 passengers from Denver to Miami when lightning strikes the cockpit, blinding him completely in both eyes, with zero visibility and a massive storm ahead. He has exactly 47 minutes of fuel left to land a Boeing 737 using nothing but his voice and 20 years of flying experience. What happened next will restore your faith in human courage and prove that sometimes the impossible becomes possible when lives are on the line. Stay until the end, because this story will show you what real heroism looks like at 35,000 feet. Captain Marcus Webb had been flying commercial aircraft for American Airlines for over 20 years and had never experienced anything quite like the weather system that was building over the Colorado Rockies on November 14, 2018, as he prepared for Flight 1847. From Denver International Airport to Miami, the meteorological reports showed severe thunderstorms developing along their planned route, but nothing that seemed beyond the capabilities of his Boeing 737-800 and his experienced crew. Webb was known among his colleagues as one of the most skilled and level-headed pilots in the American Airlines fleet. He had logged over 15,000 flight hours without a single major incident and had earned a reputation for his calm demeanor under pressure and his meticulous attention to safety protocols. His co-pilot that day was First Officer Sarah Chen, a talented pilot in her own right, with 8 years of commercial flying experience, who had specifically requested to fly with Webb because of his reputation as an excellent mentor. The 247 passengers boarding Flight 1847 that evening included families returning from vacation, business travelers heading to meetings, and a group of college students excited about their spring break trip to South Florida. Among them was Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a trauma surgeon from Denver General Hospital who was traveling to Miami to present her research at a medical conference. She would later play a crucial role in the events that unfolded. As the Boeing 737 pushed back from Gate B-23 at 6:47 p.m. Mountain Time, the weather conditions seemed manageable with light rain and moderate winds that posed no immediate threat to the flight. Webb conducted his pre-flight briefing with the cabin crew led by Senior Flight Attendant Jennifer Walsh, who had been flying for 12 years and had worked with Webb on numerous previous flights. The mood in the cockpit was professional and optimistic, as they anticipated a routine 3.5-hour flight to Miami. The takeoff from Denver's runway 16R proceeded normally as Webb guided the aircraft into the darkening Colorado sky. The city lights below gradually disappeared as they climbed through the cloud layer and set course for their planned route over Kansas and Arkansas. First Officer Chen handled communications with air traffic control, while Webb monitored the weather radar that showed the storm system intensifying but still appearing navigable with minor course adjustments. For the first hour of the flight, everything proceeded exactly according to plan as the aircraft cruised smoothly at 37,000 feet above the developing weather system. Passengers had settled in for the flight, with some sleeping, others reading or watching movies on their personal devices. The flight attendants completed their initial service and were preparing for the dinner service when Webb noticed that the weather radar was showing a pattern he had never seen before in 2 decades of flying. The storm system that had appeared manageable on the ground was rapidly intensifying into what meteorologists would later classify as a supercell thunderstorm, with vertical development reaching nearly 5,000 feet, making it impossible for commercial aircraft to fly over. Webb requested permission from air traffic control to deviate south around the storm, but was told that multiple aircraft were requesting similar routing changes and that delays were inevitable. At 8:23 p.m., as Flight 1847 began its approach to the edge of the storm system, Webb made the decision to request a more significant route deviation that would take them further south, but would avoid the most severe weather. Air traffic control approved the change, and Webb banked the aircraft to the new heading, while Chen updated their flight plan and estimated arrival time in Miami. The passengers remained largely unaware of the weather challenges ahead as the flight attendants began serving dinner and the aircraft maintained smooth flight conditions. Dr. Rodriguez was reviewing her presentation notes while other passengers enjoyed their meals or dozed in their seats. The calm atmosphere in the cabin contrasted sharply with the growing concern in the cockpit as Webb watched the storm system continue to expand. At 8:41 p.m., Flight 1847 entered the outer bands of the thunderstorm and immediately encountered severe turbulence that sent passengers grabbing for their armrests and prompted the flight attendants to suspend service and secure the cabin. Webb turned on the seatbelt sign and made an announcement asking passengers to remain seated with their seatbelts fastened while they navigated through the rough weather. The aircraft was being buffeted by powerful wind shears and downdrafts that tested Webb's skills as he fought to maintain altitude and heading while avoiding the most severe cells of the storm. Chen monitored their instruments carefully, calling out altitude and airspeed changes while Webb relied on his years of experience to feel his way through the turbulent air. At 8:47 p.m. as they approached what appeared to be a break in the storm system, Flight 1847 was struck by a massive lightning bolt that hit the aircraft near the cockpit with a brilliant flash and deafening crack that could be heard throughout the cabin. Passengers screamed as the lights flickered and electronic devices shut down momentarily while Webb fought to maintain control of the aircraft. The lightning strike caused immediate and catastrophic damage to several critical systems, including the primary navigation equipment, and most significantly, created an electrical surge that damaged the cockpit lighting and instrument displays. But the most devastating effect was the intense flash of light that permanently damaged Webb's retinas, leaving him completely blind in both eyes within seconds of the strike. Webb realized immediately that something was terribly wrong as his vision went from normal to complete darkness in an instant. He called out to Chen, asking her to confirm their altitude and heading. While trying to process what had happened to him, the instruments were flickering and several systems were showing warning messages, but Webb's most immediate concern was the fact that he could see absolutely nothing. First Officer Chen quickly assessed the situation and realized that not only were several aircraft systems damaged, but her captain was experiencing a medical emergency that had left him unable to see. She immediately took control of the aircraft and began running through emergency procedures while Webb tried to understand the extent of his vision loss. The lightning strike had occurred at one of the most critical phases of their flight as they were still navigating through severe weather with limited options for emergency landing sites. Chen radioed air traffic control to declare an emergency and request immediate assistance. While Webb struggled to come to terms with the fact that he was completely blind and would need to rely entirely on his other senses and his co-pilot to safely land the aircraft. Dr. Rodriguez in the cabin had immediately recognized the sound and effects of a lightning strike and was already moving toward the front of the aircraft to offer medical assistance if needed. Her experience as a trauma surgeon had taught her to respond quickly to emergency situations, and she sensed that the crew might need her help. The passengers were understandably frightened by the lightning strike and the continued severe turbulence, but remained calm thanks to the professional announcements from the flight attendants who assured them that the crew was handling the situation. Jennifer Walsh coordinated with the other flight attendants to keep passengers seated and prepared for possible emergency procedures while monitoring the cockpit situation. Webb's immediate priority was to help Chen understand their exact position and status while dealing with the psychological trauma of his sudden blindness, his years of experience flying in various weather conditions and emergency situations became crucial as he relied on his knowledge of the aircraft systems and his ability to interpret sounds and sensations to assist in flying the plane. The moments immediately following Captain Webb's loss of vision tested every aspect of his training and experience as he had to rapidly adapt from being the pilot in command to becoming a voice-guided navigator who could no longer see his instruments or the world. Outside the cockpit, First Officer Chen found herself suddenly thrust into the role of primary pilot while dealing with damaged aircraft systems and severe weather conditions that would challenge even the most experienced aviator. Webb's first instinct was to maintain his composure and professional demeanor despite the overwhelming shock of his sudden blindness. He knew that panic would only make the situation worse and that his 20 years of flying experience were now more valuable than ever as he would need to guide Chen through procedures and decisions using only his voice and his intimate knowledge of the Boeing 737 systems and capabilities. Chen immediately took full control of the aircraft and began assessing the extent of the damage caused by the lightning strike while simultaneously trying to navigate through the Continuing thunderstorm, several navigation systems were offline or providing unreliable readings, and the weather radar was flickering intermittently, making it difficult to identify safe paths through the storm clouds. Webb began systematically working through his memory of the aircraft's emergency procedures while describing to Chen exactly what she needed to do to manage the various system failures. His voice remained calm and authoritative as he called out specific switch positions and procedures, even though he couldn't see any of the controls or instruments that he was describing in detail. The communication with air traffic control became crucial as Chen declared a medical emergency for the captain while simultaneously reporting multiple system failures and requesting priority handling and weather guidance. The air traffic controllers immediately began coordinating with other aircraft in the area to clear a path for Flight 1847 while providing detailed weather information to help them navigate safely. Dr. Rodriguez had made her way to the front of the cabin and was speaking with senior flight attendant Jennifer Walsh about the possibility that the crew might need medical assistance. When Walsh learned that Rodriguez was a trauma surgeon, she immediately brought her to the cockpit door to assess whether she could help with Captain Webb's condition. Webb agreed to a quick medical evaluation while continuing to provide guidance to Chen about their flight path and system management. Dr. Rodriguez quickly determined that Webb had suffered severe retinal damage from the lightning flash and that his blindness was likely permanent, but she also assessed that he was mentally sharp and physically capable of continuing to assist with the flight. The weather conditions continued to challenge their progress as Chen had to navigate around additional thunderstorm cells while managing the damaged aircraft systems and learning to rely completely on Webb's voice guidance for procedures she had never performed as the primary pilot. The stress of the situation was enormous, but both pilots maintained their professional focus. Webb began using his other senses more acutely than ever before as he listened to the sound of the engines to assess their performance, felt the aircraft's movements through the turbulence to help guide Chen's control inputs, and used his memory of their flight plan to help navigate despite the damaged navigation equipment. The passengers remained largely unaware of the full extent of the emergency as the flight attendants maintained calm in the cabin while preparing for the possibility of an emergency landing. Jennifer Walsh made regular announcements asking passengers to remain seated and assured them that the crew was managing the weather-related challenges professionally. Chen's flying skills were being tested beyond anything she had experienced in her 80 years of commercial aviation as she had to simultaneously fly the aircraft through severe weather, manage multiple system failures, and coordinate with air traffic control while following Webb's continuous guidance about procedures and decision-making. Webb's knowledge of airports along their route became invaluable as he began calculating fuel consumption and identifying potential diversion airports that would have the facilities and runway length necessary for an emergency landing with their damaged aircraft. His mental database of airport information accumulated over 20 years proved to be as valuable as any electronic navigation system. The aircraft's autopilot system had been damaged in the lightning strike, forcing Chen to hand-fly the aircraft through the turbulent conditions while Webb provided continuous guidance about power settings, control inputs, and system management. His ability to translate his experience into specific verbal instructions became the key to their survival. Dr. Rodriguez returned to the cabin to help prepare the passengers and flight attendants for a possible emergency landing while also coordinating with the medical authorities on the ground who were being alerted about Webb's condition and the potential need for immediate medical attention upon landing. The fuel situation became increasingly critical as the weather diversions and system management issues had increased their fuel consumption beyond normal levels. Webb calculated that they had enough fuel to reach Miami under normal conditions, but that any significant further delays or diversions could put them in a fuel emergency situation. Chen's confidence grew as she became more accustomed to flying entirely by Webb's voice guidance and her own instrument readings. The partnership between the blind captain and his co-pilot developed into an extraordinary example of crew resource management under the most extreme circumstances imaginable. Air traffic control began coordinating with emergency services at Miami International Airport to prepare for their arrival, including having medical personnel standing by for Captain Webb and emergency equipment positioned in case the landing proved challenging due to their System failures. Webb's mental image of the Miami airport approach became crucial as he began describing the runway layout, wind patterns, and approach procedures that Chen would need to execute. For their landing, his ability to create detailed verbal pictures of the airport environment would prove essential for a safe arrival. The communication between Webb and Chen evolved into a constant dialogue where he provided guidance about everything from engine parameters to control surface positions, while she executed his instructions and provided him with continuous updates about their instruments and outside conditions. The passengers began to sense that something unusual was happening as the flight took longer than expected and the crew's announcements became more frequent, but the professional demeanor of the flight attendants helped maintain calm even as preparations for an emergency landing continued behind the scenes. Webb's determination to bring his passengers safely to their destination despite his blindness became an inspiring example of dedication to duty and professional excellence. His refusal to let his disability prevent him from using his experience and knowledge to help save lives demonstrated extraordinary courage under pressure. As Flight 1847 approached Miami International Airport, the magnitude of the challenge facing Captain Webb and First Officer Chen became clear as they would need to execute a precision instrument approach and landing using only Chen's visual references and Webb's voice guidance while managing multiple aircraft system failures and dealing with the psychological pressure of an emergency situation. Webb began the approach preparation by walking Chen through each step of the instrument landing system approach for Miami's runway 8R while painting a detailed verbal picture of what she should expect to see at each stage of their descent. His 20 years of experience flying into Miami allowed him to describe specific landmarks, visual references, and potential challenges that she might encounter during the approach. The air traffic controllers at Miami had cleared all other traffic from their approach path and had emergency vehicles standing by along the runway, including fire trucks, ambulances, and medical personnel who were prepared to respond immediately once the aircraft was safely on the ground. The entire airport was focused on bringing Flight 1847 home safely. Chen began the descent from cruise altitude while Webb monitored their progress by listening to engine sounds, feeling the aircraft's attitude changes, and using his memory of normal descent profiles to ensure they were following a safe approach path. Every call-out and instruction had to be perfect, as there was no room for error during this critical phase of flight. The weather conditions at Miami were marginal, with scattered thunderstorms in the area and wind gusts that would make the approach challenging even under normal circumstances. Webb had to factor these conditions into his guidance while Chen focused on flying precise headings and altitudes despite the stress of knowing that hundreds of lives depended on their coordination. Dr. Rodriguez had briefed the passengers on emergency landing procedures and was positioned in the cabin to provide immediate medical assistance if needed, while the flight attendants prepared the cabin for a possible evacuation and ensured that all passengers understood the location of emergency exits and safety equipment. Webb's mental calculation of their fuel remaining indicated that they had enough for one approach attempt with minimal reserve, which meant that Chen would need to execute a perfect landing on their first try, as there would not be sufficient fuel for a missed approach and second attempt. This added enormous pressure to an already challenging situation. As they descended through 1,000 feet, Webb began calling out specific power settings and configuration changes while Chen extended the landing gear and flaps according to his instructions. Every movement had to be coordinated perfectly, as Webb could not see the instruments or outside references that would normally guide these critical configuration changes. The instrument landing system guidance was partially compromised due to the lightning strike damage, which meant that Chen had to rely more heavily on visual references and Webb's experience-based guidance rather than the electronic navigation aids that pilots typically use for precision approaches in challenging weather conditions. Webb's voice remained calm and confident as he guided Chen through each phase of the approach, while internally dealing with the reality that his flying career was over and that his blindness would forever change his life. But his immediate focus remained entirely on bringing his passengers safely to the ground regardless of his personal situation. The approach began with Chen flying the aircraft manually, while Webb provided continuous guidance about altitude, airspeed, and heading corrections based on his mental model of the approach path and his interpretation of the aircraft's behavior and engine sounds. This extraordinary demonstration of non-visual flying skills had never been attempted in commercial aviation. As they descended below the clouds and Chen gained visual contact with the Miami airport, Webb's descriptions of what she should be seeing proved to be remarkably accurate, as his mental image of the approach matched perfectly with the visual references that Chen was observing from the cockpit windows. The passengers could sense the tension in the cabin as the aircraft configured for landing, and the flight attendants took their positions for the arrival. While they were not fully aware of Captain Webb's condition, they could tell from the crew's behavior that this was not a routine landing. Chen's flying skills were tested to their absolute limit, as she had to make precise control inputs based on Webb's guidance while also processing her own visual and instrument information. The coordination between the blind captain and his co-pilot represented one of the most remarkable examples of crew teamwork in aviation history. Webb began calling out altitude and airspeed targets with extraordinary precision, while Chen flew the approach profile exactly as he described. His ability to maintain a mental picture of their position and progress without any visual references demonstrated the incredible depth of his experience and skill as a professional pilot. The final approach phase required the most precise coordination as Webb guided Chen through the critical last few hundred feet, where exact speed, altitude, and alignment would determine whether they could land safely. His instructions became more frequent and specific as they approached the runway threshold. Air traffic control and emergency personnel watched in amazement as Flight 1847 approached the runway with what appeared to be normal precision, despite the extraordinary circumstances in the cockpit. The teamwork between Webb and Chen was producing a textbook approach that would have been impressive under normal conditions. Chen's hands on the controls followed Webb's guidance perfectly as she made small corrections to maintain the proper glide path and alignment with the runway centerline. The aircraft was behaving normally despite the system damage, and their approach looked stable and safe to observers on the ground. Webb's final instructions focused on the landing flare and touchdown as he coached Chen through the critical moment when the aircraft would transition from flying to rolling on the runway. His ability to time these instructions perfectly without being able to see the runway or instruments demonstrated extraordinary skill and experience. The touchdown was smooth and controlled as Chen followed Webb's guidance to perfection, bringing the Boeing 737 safely onto Miami's runway 8R after one of the most challenging flights in commercial aviation history. The emergency vehicles immediately began following the aircraft as it rolled out and came to a stop. The passengers erupted in applause as they realized they were safely on the ground, while the flight attendants began preparing for a normal deplaning process since the aircraft had landed without incident. Dr. Rodriguez was amazed by what she had witnessed and immediately prepared to assist with Captain Webb's medical care. Webb's first words after the successful landing were to congratulate Chen on her exceptional flying and to thank his entire crew for their professionalism under extraordinary circumstances. Despite his personal loss, he remained focused on the safety and well-being of everyone aboard the aircraft. The immediate aftermath of Flight 1847's emergency landing at Miami International Airport marked the beginning of a remarkable transformation for Captain Marcus Webb, as he transitioned from being a victim of a tragic accident to becoming an inspiration for aviators around the world and a symbol of human determination in the face of seemingly impossible challenges. Medical personnel who boarded the aircraft immediately after its arrival were amazed to learn about Webb's condition and the role he had played in safely landing the damaged Boeing 737. Dr. Rodriguez provided them with a detailed medical assessment, while Webb insisted on remaining in the cockpit until all passengers had safely deplaned, demonstrating his continued commitment to their welfare despite his own serious condition. The passengers learned about Captain Webb's blindness as they deplaned, and many stopped to thank him personally for his courage and skill. Several passengers, including business executives and medical professionals, were moved to tears as they realized that this man had guided them safely to the ground despite being unable to see anything around him. First Officer Chen was initially overwhelmed by the magnitude of what they had accomplished together, but quickly realized that her successful landing had only been possible because of Webb's extraordinary guidance and his willingness to continue functioning as captain despite his disability. Their partnership during the emergency became legendary within the aviation community. The Federal Aviation Administration immediately launched an investigation into the incident, while simultaneously recognizing that Webb and Chen had demonstrated exceptional airmanship under conditions that exceeded any emergency scenario in pilot training programs. The investigation would later conclude that their actions had prevented what could have been a catastrophic accident. Webb was transported to Miami's Bascom Palmer Eye Institute, where the world's leading ophthalmologists confirmed that his blindness was permanent, but also marveled at his ability to continue functioning as a pilot for nearly an hour after losing his sight. The medical team had never encountered a case where someone had performed such complex tasks immediately after sudden onset blindness. The aviation industry's response to Webb's story was immediate and overwhelming as pilots, airlines, and aviation organizations around the world recognized his actions as representing the highest ideals of the profession. American Airlines announced that Webb would receive full medical retirement benefits and would be honored as a company hero. The media coverage of Flight 1847's emergency landing focused not only on the technical aspects of the blind landing, but also on Webb's character and his decision to continue serving his passengers despite his personal tragedy. Interviews with passengers revealed that many had no idea during the flight that their captain could not see. Webb's family, including his wife Sarah and 2 teenage children, flew to Miami immediately after learning about the incident and were amazed by his positive attitude and his focus on the successful outcome rather than his personal loss. His wife later said that his reaction to blindness was typical of his character and his tendency to focus on solutions rather than problems. The psychological adjustment to sudden blindness presented enormous challenges for Webb, but he approached his rehabilitation with the same methodical determination that had made him an exceptional pilot. He enrolled in programs to learn mobility skills and adaptive technologies while also beginning to explore new ways to contribute to aviation safety. 6 months after the incident, Webb had adapted remarkably well to his blindness and had begun working with American Airlines' flight training department to develop new emergency procedures based on his experience during Flight 1847. His insights into non-visual flying techniques were incorporated into training programs for pilots worldwide. The relationship between Webb and Chen evolved into a lifelong friendship as they continued to be invited to speak together at aviation conferences and safety seminars. Their story became required study material at flight schools, and their demonstration of crew resource management under extreme stress became a model for the industry. Webb's speaking engagements at aviation events drew standing ovations as he described his experience during Flight 1847 and emphasized the importance of thorough training, mental preparation, and teamwork in overcoming seemingly impossible challenges. His presentations inspired countless pilots to reconsider their own preparedness for emergencies. The passengers from Flight 1847 organized annual reunions to celebrate their survival and to honor Captain Webb's heroism. Many of them credited his example with inspiring them to overcome challenges in their own lives, and several established scholarship funds for aspiring pilots in his honor. Dr. Rodriguez became a close friend of the Webb family and often spoke about how his courage during the medical emergency had influenced her own approach to crisis situations. In the operating room, she credited his example with making her a better surgeon and a more resilient person. The Federal Aviation Administration created new regulations requiring enhanced lightning protection systems for commercial aircraft and improved training for pilots dealing with electrical emergencies. These changes were directly influenced by the lessons learned from Flight 1847's experience. Webb's transition to his new role as a safety consultant and motivational speaker allowed him to continue contributing to aviation while inspiring people in many other fields who faced their own seemingly impossible challenges. His message about adapting to change and finding new purposes in life resonated far beyond the aviation community. The Boeing 737 that Webb had landed safely was repaired and returned to service with a special plaque in the cockpit commemorating the crew's extraordinary performance. Pilots who flew this aircraft often requested to see the plaque, and many reported feeling inspired by the legacy of Flight 1847. Webb's autobiography, titled Flying Blind: A Captain's Journey from Darkness to Light, became a bestseller and was translated into multiple languages. The book's message about finding strength in adversity and the power of human determination resonated with readers around the world. The aviation industry established the Captain Marcus Webb Award for exceptional airmanship, which is presented annually to pilots who demonstrate extraordinary skill and judgment in emergency situations. Recipients of this award are recognized for embodying the same courage and professionalism that Webb displayed during Flight 1847. Training simulators around the world now include scenarios based on Flight 1847's emergency, allowing pilots to practice the communication and coordination skills that proved so crucial during Webb's blind landing. These training exercises have helped prepare thousands of pilots for similar challenges. Webb's legacy extends far beyond aviation, as his story has been featured in documentaries, films, and books about human resilience and the power of teamwork under pressure. His example continues to inspire people facing their own life challenges to find strength and purpose despite seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Today, Captain Marcus Webb continues to work as a consultant and speaker while also serving on the boards of several organizations that support people with disabilities. His transformation from victim to inspiration demonstrates that even the most devastating personal setbacks can become opportunities to help others and make meaningful contributions to society. The passengers and crew of Flight 1847 remain connected through social media and regular gatherings where they continue to celebrate not just their survival but also the example of courage and determination that Captain Webb provided during their darkest hour. His story continues to remind everyone that heroes are ordinary people who choose to do extraordinary things when circumstances demand it. Captain Marcus Webb's story proves that sometimes our greatest challenges can reveal our greatest strengths, and that true heroism isn't about having perfect vision or perfect conditions, but about using whatever abilities we have to help others when they need us most. His decision to continue guiding Flight 1847 despite losing his sight saved 247 lives and created a legacy that continues to inspire people around the world. But I want to hear from you. What do you think gave Captain Webb the strength to continue functioning as a pilot despite sudden blindness? Was it his 20 years of experience, his commitment to his passengers, or something deeper about human nature that emerges in crisis situations? Have you ever faced a moment when you had to overcome what seemed impossible to help others? Share your thoughts and stories in the comments below and let me know what this story means to you. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories of human courage and determination that show us what we're capable of when we refuse to give up, and hit that notification bell so you never miss these inspiring tales that prove that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when lives are on the line.